Gigi is not built like a legend in the show. He is not presented as an icon, or as a future boss, or as some impossible force of nature. He is presented almost the way real organizations often present their most useful people. He is competent, calm, dependable, and easy to underestimate. He does not arrive carrying a giant personality. He is not somebody the show uses to entertain the audience with wild digressions, reckless appetites, or grand declarations. He is there because the family needs men like him. The machine cannot run on narcissists alone. It needs men who can be trusted with unpleasant work, men who do not panic, men who understand silence, men who can carry out an order and not turn it into theater. Gigi represents the practical mafia far more than the glamorous mafia. He is what the life actually needs, even if it is not what the life celebrates. That is why his story becomes so sad and so important. Gigi is one of the clearest examples in The Sopranos of a man who looks built for the life, until the life asks him for a different skill set than the one that got him there. He can operate inside the system as a soldier. He can follow orders. He can stay disciplined. He can do violence without turning it into personal chaos. But once Tony promotes him and places him in a role where he has to manage unstable men, absorb constant disrespect, and carry the pressure of leadership without ever admitting weakness, Gigi begins to break. And the tragedy is that he does not break in a dramatic way. He breaks the way most men in that world probably would, quietly, internally, physically. The pressure does not turn him into a maniac. It turns his own body against him. That matters because Gigi is not just a side character who dies. He is a statement. He represents a kind of mafia man that the old mythology loves to pretend exists in abundance, but in reality cannot protect. He is the respectable version of the gangster middle class. He is not a visionary. He is not a clown. He is not a psycho. He is not a romantic. He is a worker in a criminal system, and The Sopranos uses him to show that this system does not actually reward steadiness the way it claims to. It uses steadiness. It leans on it. It spends it. And when that steadiness finally collapses, the machine moves on. From Tony's point of view, that may be the most disturbing part of all. Gigi's early function in the story tells you a lot about why Tony values him. Tony trusts him with serious work, including the removal of Philly Parisi, a job that required discretion and control more than swagger. That kind of assignment is revealing. Tony does not hand sensitive tasks to random idiots. He hands them to men he believes can do the job cleanly, with minimal noise, minimal ego, and minimal loose ends. Gigi fits that mold. He seems like one of those men who understand the rules of the life better than the people who are always talking about the rules. He knows where he stands. He knows what is required. He does not appear hungry for attention. In a world full of men who constantly advertise themselves, Gigi's restraint makes him valuable. And that is where the first layer of his story begins. In the mafia, the traits that make a man reliable at one level do not automatically make him successful at the next. In fact, sometimes they become liabilities. Tony sees Gigi as a serious man, a controllable man, a man who can be trusted. Those are real strengths for a subordinate. But leadership in The Sopranos is not about being the best man in a moral sense, or even the most professional man in a practical sense. It is about surviving the politics above you and below you at the same time. It is about managing monsters, not just obeying one. It is about absorbing resentment, smoothing out chaos, punishing when necessary, flattering when useful, and never letting people smell weakness. A capo does not just earn, a capo governs. And governing a crew of damaged, greedy, insecure men is a completely different skill from being a good soldier. Tony learns this the hard way through Gigi. When Richie April is gone, the question of who should control that crew becomes more than an administrative issue. It becomes a test of Tony's values as a boss. Ralph is the obvious candidate in terms of raw talent and earning potential, or at least he appears to be. But Ralph is also dangerous in every way that matters. He is disrespectful, theatrical, unpredictable, and constantly pushing boundaries. Tony cannot stand him. More importantly, Tony does not want to reward the exact type of personality that makes leadership miserable. So Tony tries to impose order by choosing Gigi instead. In theory, it makes sense. Give the crew to a stable man. Give power to someone who will not turn every day into a circus. Show that loyalty and discipline still count for something. But that decision reveals Tony's deepest blind spot as a leader. He often thinks he can solve structural problems through personal preference. He thinks that if he dislikes one kind of man and likes another kind, he can impose that judgment on the family and make the reality line up with his instincts. Sometimes he is right. Often he is not. The April crew is not an empty chair waiting for a calm manager. It is a political environment already full of ego, expectation, and resentment. Ralph believes he deserves it. Other men likely assume it should go to someone with more natural ties to the crew. Gigi is not stepping into neutral ground. He is stepping into a room where the air is already poisoned. That is what makes his promotion feel less like a reward and more like a slow execution. Gigi gets the title, but he does not get the emotional authority that would make the title safe. The men under him are not naturally his men. The loudest destabilizing force in the room, Ralph, remains right there, rich, clever, disrespectful, and impossible to ignore. Tony, meanwhile, expects Gigi to handle it. That is one of the most brutal things about being a boss in this world. The boss can create a problem in the name of strategy, then act as though the subordinate's failure to solve it is a personal weakness rather than the predictable result of impossible circumstances. Tony gives Gigi responsibility but not peace. He gives him status but not a stable environment. He gives him an order to rule, then leaves him to wrestle with a man who is almost built in a lab to make ruling unbearable. Ralph is crucial to understanding why Gigi could not handle the pressure, because Ralph represents the opposite type of mobster. Ralph externalizes everything. Every impulse becomes performance. Every grievance becomes a joke, insult, scheme, or provocation. He does not carry pressure inward the way Gigi does. He throws it outward onto everybody else. Men like Ralph often survive longer than they should because they spread their damage around. Men like Gigi often die sooner than they should because they keep trying to contain the damage inside themselves. In normal society, that difference already matters. In the mafia, it matters even more because there is no healthy release valve. No honest conversation, no real support, no way to say this job is killing me without sounding weak, unfit, or finished. That is the central cruelty of Gigi's story. He is asked to perform strength in a role that is consuming him, inside a culture where admitting strain would itself be humiliating. So he does what many functional men do in dysfunctional systems. He keeps going, he tries to endure, he tries to manage. He complains a little, maybe, but not in a way that changes the structure around him, and the structure keeps feeding on him. This is where Gigi starts to represent something larger than himself. He represents the false promise at the center of mafia life. The mafia loves to present itself as a world of order, hierarchy, merit, and masculine certainty. Work hard, be loyal, keep your mouth shut, and you will move up. That is the mythology. Gigi is one of the best examples of why that mythology is rotten. He does move up, but moving up does not bring security. It brings exposure. It brings stress. It brings the obligation to control men who may not respect him, while pleasing a boss who expects results but does not want excuses. The reward for being reliable is not comfort. It is heavier responsibility in a system that has no real way to process human limits. In that sense, Gigi is not a failure of the mafia. He is proof of how the mafia really works. A lot of people in that world survive by being shameless. Gigi is not shameless enough. He is too contained, too serious, too aware of what his job requires. That may sound like a compliment, but in a poisonous organization, it becomes a weakness. Men who feel deeply but speak little often suffer the most because they keep trying to maintain the surface. Gigi does not make leadership look glamorous. He makes it look administrative, draining, and lonely. He has to deal with petty conflict, challenges to authority, jockeying beneath him, and the constant sense that one wrong step could make him look soft or incompetent. He is not living the fantasy of power. He is doing management inside hell. And The Sopranos is always at its best when it strips away the fantasy like that. Gigi's arc tells the audience that a capo is not just a man with more money and more status. He is a pressure container. He has to hold in the instability of the people around him while never letting himself crack. The trouble is that Gigi is not built to leak. He is built to hold, so the pressure keeps building. It is tempting to say Gigi could not handle the pressure because he was weak, but that would be the wrong reading, and it would also be the reading the mafia itself prefers. The mafia always personalizes structural problems. If a man breaks, they say he was not strong enough. If a man flips, they say he was not real enough. If a man cannot lead, they say he never had it. What they almost never say is that the organization itself puts men in unwinnable situations and then blames the body that finally gives way. Gigi did not fail because he lacked seriousness. He failed because seriousness alone was never enough. Tony promoted him as though discipline could substitute for political fit, emotional flexibility, and real control over his crew. It could not. And then comes the way he dies, which may be the darkest punchline in the entire story. Gigi does not die in a blaze of glory. He does not die during a hit, or in a siege, or in a dramatic confrontation with a rival. He dies suddenly, on the toilet, with the pressure of his own body turning fatal. The scene is so brutal because of how ordinary and humiliating it is. In another show, a mob captain might die in a hail of bullets and become a legend. In The Sopranos, a mob captain can die because stress, diet, age, strain, and a clogged body finally catch up to him in the least heroic setting imaginable. It is funny at a distance, and the show knows that. The men around him even process it with the usual mix of superstition, discomfort, and dark humor. But underneath that humor is one of the bleakest truths the series ever delivers. The life does not just kill you with enemies. It kills you with routine, with stress, with food, with blood pressure, with silence, with holding too much inside for too long. That death is not random in a thematic sense. It is perfect. Gigi's whole story is about internal pressure with nowhere to go, and he dies while straining, alone, in a moment of bodily pressure that turns catastrophic. The symbolism is almost cruel in how exact it is. His system backs up and fails. That is what his entire leadership experience has been. Everything backing up. Tension from Tony, tension from Ralph, tension from the crew, no honest relief, no clean solution. No way to empty out the pressure without losing face. Then finally, the body becomes the place where the truth can no longer be hidden. For Tony, this is more than just a death in the ranks. It lands on several levels at once. First, it is a practical failure of Tony's judgment. Tony made a choice. He denied Ralph the promotion because he wanted a better kind of order. He wanted to prove that being a toxic earner did not entitle a man to power. He chose Gigi because Gigi represented the kind of mobster Tony could live with. Then Gigi dies, and Tony is left facing the exact reality he was trying to postpone. He still has Ralph. He still has the same poisoned crew. He still has to deal with the politics. In a brutal way, Gigi's death tells Tony that preference is not the same thing as control. Tony can promote the man he likes, but he cannot will him into surviving the job. He can try to build the organization in his own image, but the organization keeps reminding him it has its own gravity. Second, Gigi's death reinforces Tony's growing sense that leadership is isolation. Tony already understands stress more intimately than most of his men because of his panic attacks and therapy. He is obsessed with the connection between emotional strain and physical collapse, even when he tries to laugh it off or bury it in appetite, sex, anger, or self-pity. So when Gigi dies under the weight of pressure, Tony is not just watching a subordinate fall, he is seeing a version of his own future. Maybe not in the same form, but in the same logic. A man in this life does not need a bullet to die, he just needs enough years of burden. Enough resentment. Enough responsibilities he cannot share. Enough trapped emotion. Gigi becomes another piece of evidence that the life corrodes from within. That matters especially because Tony is always trying to preserve the illusion that he is stronger than the men around him. He wants to believe he can take more, carry more, endure more. Sometimes he even needs that belief just to function. But Gigi is disturbing because Gigi is not some spectacularly unstable wreck. He is one of the steadier men Tony has. If a man like that can be taken out by the pressure of captaincy, what does that say about the top job? What does that say about the boss who has to deal with every crew, every grievance, every law enforcement threat, every family problem, every betrayal, every money issue, every friend turning old, sick, weak, or dead? Gigi's death does not make Tony softer. It makes him harder. That is an important distinction. Tony almost never learns humane lessons from pain. He learns defensive ones. He learns that attachment is dangerous, trust is expensive, and idealism about human quality is a waste of time. Gigi was one of the men who seemed manageable, respectable, maybe even reassuring by the standards of that world, and even he does not last. So Tony becomes more cynical. He becomes more willing to accept that he may have to rely on men he hates, provided they produce. That is one of the most important consequences of Gigi's story. By failing to survive, Gigi indirectly helps teach Tony that morality, decency, and even stability are secondary to utility. If the calm man dies and the monster earns, the monster starts looking like the practical choice. In that sense, Gigi's death helps clear the path for Ralph not just in terms of promotion, but in terms of philosophy. Tony does not suddenly start respecting Ralph as a human being. He still despises him. But the system keeps telling Tony that his personal disgust does not change the economic and political reality. The crew needs a captain. Money needs to flow. The family cannot sit still because Tony wishes the world were populated by more Gigis and fewer Ralphs. So Tony is forced, again, to make peace with the type of man he cannot stand but cannot avoid. That deepens his bitterness about leadership. The boss is supposed to have choices, but more and more Tony sees that his choices are mostly versions of damage control. There is also something else Gigi's story does to Tony's mindset, and it is quieter but maybe even more important. It reinforces Tony's belief that the family is weaker than it looks. A lot of Tony's anger throughout the series comes from the fact that he inherited something smaller, pettier, and more unstable than the mythology promised. He wants to imagine himself as the head of a real institution, something with discipline, continuity, and standards. But over and over he discovers that what he actually runs is a collection of emotional cripples, opportunists, nostalgics, gamblers, addicts, blowhards, and damaged men barely held together by fear and money. Gigi represents one of the few men who actually resemble the serious mafia soldier of old-world fantasy. Not because he is noble, but because he is disciplined. And even that man ends up chewed up by the role. So what is Tony supposed to take from that? That there are 10 better men waiting in the wings? There are not. That the hierarchy produces mature leadership? It does not. That respect flows naturally from the title? It doesn't. Gigi's downfall tells Tony that the family's bench is thin. Very thin. The people beneath him are either unstable in one direction or exhausted in the other. That makes Tony feel more trapped at the top, because bad organizations make the leader paranoid not only about enemies, but about replacement. If no one beneath you feels truly solid, then every death, every addiction, every feud, every humiliation becomes more threatening. That is a big part of why Tony's mindset keeps darkening as the series goes on. He is not just losing innocence. He is losing faith in the possibility of stable succession, stable order, stable manhood inside this life. Gigi is part of that erosion. He is a reminder that even the men who look right for the job may not survive the job, and the men who do survive may do so precisely because they are worse. From a larger perspective, Gigi also represents the collapse of the old mafia image in a very modern way. The old romantic version of organized crime is full of ideas about strength, ritual, respect, and controlled violence. Men in suits, men with codes, men built for pressure. But The Sopranos keep showing that the modern mafia is really a stressed-out workplace with blood on it. It is less empire than bureaucracy, less honor than management, less warrior culture than grievance culture backed by extortion. Gigi fits that truth perfectly. He is not a prince of the underworld. He is middle management in a criminal corporation, and the promotion that should make him look powerful instead reveals how ugly the machinery is. He has to handle personnel problems, insubordination, ego disputes, and upward pressure from a boss who expects him to produce calm in an environment designed to generate disorder. That is why Gigi's story feels almost painfully real compared with more theatrical mob arcs. Many men in normal life understand his kind of defeat better than they understand a shootout. Plenty of people know what it means to be competent, promoted, overburdened, unsupported, and slowly worn down by a role that looked better from the outside. Plenty of people know what it means to discover that being good at your last job did not prepare you for the politics of your new one. Plenty of people know what it means to hold stress inside because the culture around you only respects performance, not honesty. Gigi is a gangster, yes, but the shape of his suffering is almost corporate. That makes him one of the most modern figures in the show. It also makes him one of the most revealing. Because once you really look at Gigi, a lot of Tony's world starts to make more sense. Tony does not just rule through violence, he rules over human weakness. He is constantly trying to force broken men into stable functions. Sometimes he does it through fear, sometimes through money, sometimes through personal favoritism. But the deeper truth is that the machine beneath him is made of men who are not emotionally built for the roles they occupy. Christopher has ambition but no discipline. Paulie has loyalty but no depth. Ralph has brilliance but no character. Pussy has history but no future. Vito has earning power but hidden fractures. Bobby has softness but limited authority. Silvio may be the most balanced, but even he seems better suited to supporting power than carrying all of it. And Gigi, who might look like one of the cleaner pieces on the board, turns out not to be able to bear sustained command. That leaves Tony in a very bad psychological place. It confirms his fear that there is no real answer, no ideal subordinate, no stable system waiting just beyond 1 or 2 personnel changes, only trade-offs, only men with different weaknesses, only choices between types of damage. Gigi's story is therefore not just about pressure killing a man. It is about Tony slowly understanding that pressure is the essence of the whole structure. The family survives by moving pressure downward. The boss takes pressure from law enforcement, New York, money, family life, and mortality, then passes it down to the capos. The capos pass it down to soldiers. The soldiers pass it down through violence, intimidation, and cruelty onto civilians, businesses, wives, girlfriends, children, and anyone weaker than them. Nobody dissolves the pressure. They just transfer it. That is why the world of The Sopranos feels so tense all the time. There is no peace in the system, only redistribution of anxiety. Gigi dies because at his level, for a while, the pressure stops moving and settles in one place. His body becomes the endpoint. And maybe that is the darkest thing he represents for the mafia. He represents the fact that the life is not really built around glory or even around crime in the romantic sense. It is built around stress. Endless stress. Stress over money, stress over status, stress over aging, stress over women, stress over disrespect, stress over promotion, stress over succession, stress over loyalty, stress over health, Stress over whether the men around you are useful, dangerous, weak, or secretly doomed. Gigi is one of the few characters who makes that truth visible without speeches. His entire story says that this life destroys the men who try to absorb it responsibly. By the time you step back and look at what Gigi means, his importance becomes much larger than his screen time. He is not there to be a fan favorite or a mythic figure. He is there to show the hidden cost of function. He is there to show that in Tony's world, being a serious man is not enough. Being loyal is not enough. Being reliable is not enough. Sometimes those traits only make you easier to burden, easier to use, easier to place in the spot where the pressure is strongest. The loud men attract attention, but the quiet men hold up the ceiling, and when one of those quiet men collapses, the room does not stop. It just shifts the weight onto somebody else. Tony understands that, even if he never says it that cleanly. That is why Gigi's death affects Tony's mindset in such a lasting way. It makes Tony more cynical about merit, more pessimistic about succession, more aware that his organization is full of men who either cannot lead or survive leadership only by becoming monsters. It makes him feel the trap of his own position more sharply, because a dead captain is not just a loss, it is a mirror. It tells the boss that stress is not some side effect of the life, it is the life. And if a man as steady as Gigi can be reduced to that ending, then Tony's own power starts to look less like triumph and more like a slower, grander version of the same fatal burden. That is Gigi Sastone's real story. Not the story of a minor gangster who got a promotion and died. The story of a competent man placed in an incompetent world. The story of a serious man punished for being serious. The story of how the mafia uses discipline until discipline turns into pressure, and pressure turns into death. And for Tony, it is one more lesson in the same ugly education he keeps receiving as boss. The men he can trust are often too fragile for the job, and the men who can survive the job are often the exact men he should never trust. That is not just a personnel problem. That is the heart of the whole tragedy.